With the shocking releases from WWE this past week with the likes of Nia Jax, Karrion Kross, and Keith Lee and more, could WWE 2K22 still be in trouble? And could things be getting even worse as we're getting closer and closer to the launch? Let's break down the releases and how this could impact 2K22. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Assemble. I'm Matt. Great to have you here on the show. Let's talk 2K22. Let's talk about the releases. Let's talk about how this could actually hurt the game even further. Fans have been taking to the Twitter. They've been all over the internet since we heard about these releases. Not only is it terrible that these folks are released from their contracts for either not being tested and vaccinated, for personal reasons, for mental health reasons, for whatever it is. It's terrible that folks are losing their jobs. For us as fans, we don't get to see folks like Keith Lee in the ring in a WWE ring, but hopefully we can see them in other venues. So how can this impact 2K22? That's the big question. That's the big conversation we've all been having together this past week. We already saw a huge round of cuts from 2K22. We've seen it kind of confirmed by 2K themselves, where we had that planned DLC. Bronson Reed was supposed to be one of the NXT stars in a DLC pack, and that all had to be scrapped and put away because of the last round of cuts. WWE right now is showing us kind of their cards when it comes to the consistency of releasing talent. We know that in the last 5 years, WWE has really been hoarding and grabbing all the talent possible, right? And now we're seeing that change and shift where they are going away and stripping down the rosters, making it a lot much leaner, focusing on attractions like your Goldbergs, your Brock Lesnar's, Roman Reigns, and shifting things even NXT into NXT 2.0, which is turning into the developmental system. And with that, we're seeing more and more cuts happening regularly. So right now, what I want you to do is in the comments, tell me, do you think that the latest round of cuts like Nia Jax, Karrion Kross, Scarlett, Keith Lee, Mia Yim, and so on, do you think that they will be removed from 2K22? It's the weekend. We got some Starbucks in here too. We're having a great day. By the way, everybody, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for supporting the show as we go towards 5,000 subscribers. I sincerely appreciate it. I hope you guys are all doing well. It's tough to say. It's tough to say if these rounds of cuts are going to make it in the game. But what I just said before, where WWE is doing this more regularly, every quarter now, WWE seems to be going through a bit of a cleaning house in terms of the talent. About every 3 to 4 months, we're seeing another round of talent, a lot of NXT talent, and main roster talent, some very surprising, like Bray Wyatt, Braun Strowman, Aleister Black, and so on. And then into the latest round with, for me, one of the biggest shocking releases being Keith Lee. I don't think that 2K22 will go through another delay. With 2K just having their quarterly earnings call, talking about 2K22, mentioning how it is still slated for March, but this was before WWE went through another round of releases. I don't think the game itself and the developers can handle having to postpone a launch of a game like this just because WWE might release talent. But what does impact this title is that with WWE doing rounds of cuts more regularly and consistently, this could change the model in which the game is developed. And what I mean is going away from having 2K develop DLC packs in the more traditional sense and going into much more of a service model where they can go in and add stars where they need to and potentially even remove stars. It takes a lot to create and develop and put stars like Keith Lee or anybody into these games. Maybe removing them isn't as hard. Just in my stupid head, you think of just hitting a big delete button, right? I'm sure it's more complicated than that, but if WWE does not want to pay royalties to these stars to have them in the game, and they want to recoup all of that, they may go to 2K and say, we do not want these stars in our game because they do not work for us anymore. And that could happen all the way up as we get very, very close to launch. At some point, that game has to be pressed and solidified and go gold and actually be set to be released. And if you're any company, you can't base off of what could be happening on the other side all the time. It's very tricky with a sports game, but 2K, I think with WWE and the franchise itself, I think they need to go down the route of treating it much more like a sports title where players get traded, players retire, they're no longer there anymore. WWE is an interesting world and it's a different world. And these are contracted stars and they don't go from one team to the next team and you can keep them all under the umbrella of wrestling. WWE wants to promote their current crop of stars and they don't want necessarily to have stars that don't work for the company anymore being showcased in one of their games and representing them that way. And I still don't believe that 2K is going to want to delay the game. They are still going ahead with March. They've wanted a WrestleMania season release window around the March timeframe, and I think we are still going to get that. But as we look at this roster, and if WWE does not have these stars put in the game with 2K, this is a very, very thin game from a roster perspective. And I think it's getting into a game where we see just top stars, top talent in the game. Your Seth Rollins, Becky Lynch, Charlotte, Roman Reigns, all of them. And it's a mix of top talent and legends from WWE's past. It's leaving fans head scratching. It's leaving fans kind of in the dark about what's going on. And it's leaving fans very upset with WWE as a product, as a whole, as a company. When WWE releases these stars and they have their quarterly earnings call with shareholders, and Stephanie McMahon kind of kicks off the call, or her portion of the call, and says that we have some bad news to share. And her bad news is that The Miz is not on Dancing with the Stars anymore. And she opens the call with a joke saying that we have bad news, when an hour or 2 hours later, the same day, they go ahead and release numerous talents. It shows that they don't care. And it's very unfortunate because we want to care and we want to enjoy the product they put on TV, but they do certain things that get fans very upset and have us kind of turning the channel and maybe not even buying the game. And so many of you in the community have mentioned in the comments how you're like, I'm not getting this game. I don't want this game anymore. It's going to be out of date by the time we get there. And that is also my concern. What happens if we get to a March release date for 2K22 and WWE is at that WrestleMania season, and the next night, the next earnings call after WrestleMania, they do another round of cuts? Your game is going to feel out of date. Now, we do see this in the past. It's kind of the nature of it all, where you do get a WWE title in your hands and you look at it and you go, well, the arenas on day one are out of date because WWE went ahead and updated their arenas. The stars, their attires are out of date, or their actual gimmicks are out of date, and they've altered and changed in the time the game has been created to the time that we got our hands on it. And those things we can tweak, and we can go in there and we can add a custom title. We can do the custom arenas and download them. But I think 2K themselves need to be much more hands-on and very careful with this game and how they treat it and how they communicate it across the other side with fans. I think that they need to be the ones leading the charge with us to actually say, we have confidence in this game. We are excited about it, and we're going to do everything we can to stay up to date with WWE's product, whether it be for the new title belts they introduce, or the newest arenas that WWE launches, or different attires, or different gimmicks that they update for superstars, or changing the brands for those superstars after the draft. I think 2K needs to be able to control what they can control. If they can't control the actual roster and the implications of all of that, they need to do what they can on the gaming front and make sure that they make it the best experience possible. We can do our part. We can go and download custom creations all day long. We can go into the mod community if it's on PC and go in that direction and download stars we want. But 2K needs to be able to focus on what they can do. We will do our part by trying to enjoy the game as long as it's got that big hook, that good mode. But my concern is that the roster is very thin and that this round of cuts, Nia Jax, Keith Lee stand out to me. I don't know whether or not they're going to make it into this year's game. There's still enough time where they can go in there and remove Nia Jax from the game. They could remove Keith Lee from the game. And we don't know what implications it has when it comes to a My Career mode, whether their likeness or they were utilized in a My Career, a franchise mode, a GM mode where there were cutscenes or voiceover work or anything like that. March is going to be really interesting. The next few months are going to be very interesting as we are into November. We're looking for more WWE 2K coverage in January, according to 2K. And I just get worried that every time we see releases, what this final roster is going to look like, because so many people also joke and show up the memes and everything of just like the roster is going to consist of 8 legends and like 8 current superstars, and that's it. Let me know in the comments below, what do you guys think? What do you think about the releases that we had from WWE this past week? How do you think it's going to impact 2K22 upon its release? If you guys go ahead and enjoy this episode, do Matt a favor and check out these ones right here. More WWE 2K22 coverage coming at you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode.